It is 5:59 in the evening in a grocery store in Pennsylvania, and I am pretending to read the back of a cereal box. I am not reading it. I am watching the second hand on the clock above the dairy case, and I am waiting for it to climb to the top of its slow circle. When it does, I will lift 2 fingers to my left collarbone and touch it, very lightly, the way a man might adjust his shirt collar, and no one in this store will notice, and I will not stop doing it for the rest of my life. I have done this in airports. I have done this in hospitals. I have done it at a wedding, at a funeral, in the back row of a movie theater while the screen flickered blue across 40 strangers' faces. I have done it for 4 years every evening without exception, and I do not know what would happen if I stopped. I know only this. There is a town in Vermont called Brennick. I lived there for 2 months in the summer, when I turned 28. My sister still lives there. And the things I learned in that town, I did not learn the way you learn anything else. I learned them the way an animal learns not to. Drink from a poisoned river, by watching the ones who drank from it first. This is the story of a town where everyone follows a rule no one will explain. And the worst part, the part I have only understood recently, is that I am one of them now. I came to Brennick for the bread. That sounds like a joke, but it isn't. I had been laid off in March. My sister, Maren, had been laid off in April. By the end of June, we had $900 between us, a 2007 Corolla with a broken air conditioner, and a listing she had found on a website neither of us could quite remember the name of afterward. The job was simple: baker's assistant. $11 an hour, room and board above the bakery. The owner, a woman named Ida Quinn, had written the listing herself in the formal, slightly old-fashioned cadence of someone who did not own a computer. The ad ended with a line I have thought about a great deal since: "Quiet town. We keep to ourselves. If you don't like quiet, don't come." Maren liked the quiet. I liked Maren. So we drove 14 hours northeast through a heat wave so heavy the asphalt shimmered like water, the windows down because the air conditioner was a memory, and at 4 in the afternoon on a Tuesday in early July, we crossed into Brennick. The first thing I noticed was that there was no welcome sign, not an old one, not a faded one, not a hand-painted one nailed to a tree. The road simply changed. The trees thickened, the asphalt darkened. The air cooled by what felt like 10 degrees in the space of a single breath, and we were inside. The second thing I noticed was the people. There were perhaps 15 of them on the sidewalks of the main street. An old man with a cane outside the post office. A woman pushing a stroller. 2 boys on bicycles. A young couple holding paper cups of coffee. They were ordinary, in the way small-town people are ordinary. And when our car turned onto the main street, every single one of them stopped walking at the same moment. They didn't stare. They didn't turn. They simply paused, the way a film pauses when someone hits a button. And then 3 seconds later, they kept going as if nothing had happened. Maren laughed, the small, nervous laugh she made when she was trying to convince herself of something. Maybe they don't get a lot of out-of-state plates. Maybe, I said. But I had been driving for 14 hours, and I knew, the way you know certain things in the body before the mind catches up, that we had just been counted. The bakery sat on a corner where 2 streets met at a wrong angle, the kind of angle you get in towns that were laid out before there were such things as town planners. The brick was darkened by 100 years of wood smoke. The window glass was thick and slightly warped, so that the loaves on display behind it looked from the street like they were underwater. A bell rang when we pushed the door open. The air inside smelled of rye and cardamom and, underneath both, something mineral. Whetstone, maybe, or the inside of a deep well. Ida Quinn stood behind the counter as if she had been waiting for us. She was 60-something, with a long gray braid and forearms like a stevedore. She looked at Maren first, then at me, then, last and longest, at our car through the front window. "You parked on the south side of the street," she said. "Sorry," Maren said. "Were we not supposed to?" Ida was quiet for a beat too long. Then she said in a voice that was not unkind but was not warm either, "It's fine for today. Move it before sunset. North side after dark. Always." That was the first one. The first rule. We didn't recognize it as a rule yet. We thought it was a parking ordinance or an old woman's preference or some small-town joke we hadn't gotten. We carried our bags upstairs to the apartment over the bakery, and we moved the car when we came back down, and we didn't ask why. I want to be honest about that. We didn't ask why because we were tired and because we needed the job, and because Idabel Quinn had a way of saying things that made follow-up questions feel rude. But there was something else even then, something underneath the surface of that first afternoon. A part of me had already understood, without language for it, that asking was not how things worked in Brennock. You watched. You noticed. You adjusted, and if you didn't adjust, the town adjusted you. The apartment had 2 bedrooms, a bathroom with a clawfoot tub deep enough to drown in, and a kitchen we were welcome to use as long as we cleaned up after ourselves. The windows on the north side looked out over a field of unmown grass that sloped down toward a tree line. The windows on the south side looked out over the main street. There was no television. There was a radio in the kitchen, an old one in a wooden case with a dial that turned with a satisfying click that received exactly one station. A public broadcaster from somewhere we never identified, classical music during the day, old radio dramas at night. The signal was always perfect even during the thunderstorm that came through our second night, when the lights flickered and the rain hit the window like a handful of nails. We never figured out where it came from. After a while, we stopped asking. Our first week was, on its surface, ordinary. Marin went down at 4:30 every morning to start the ovens with Idabel. I came down at 6 to sweep, restock, and work the counter. Customers came in steady but unhurried numbers, a dozen before lunch, a dozen after. And they were polite to me in the careful way you are polite to a substitute teacher you suspect will not last the week. They never asked my name. They never told me theirs. They paid in cash, almost always exact change, and on their way out, they said thank you to the floor, never to me. By the third day, I had begun, almost without meaning to keep a list. I kept it in a small notebook I had brought with me, the kind I had once used for grocery lists. I kept it under my mattress, which I understand now was the first thing I did in Brennock that I would not have done anywhere else. The list looked like this by the end of the first week. No one in Brennock used a phone in public. People had phones. I saw one once at the post office, a young man taking a brief call outside, holding the device a careful, deliberate distance from his ear, as if it were something that might bite. But no one walked down the sidewalk staring at a screen. No one took a call in the bakery. No one photographed anything, ever. The phones existed, but they were used the way phones had been used in 1995, briefly, then put away, as if their attention were a finite and dangerous resource. No one whistled. I learned this on the third morning. I was sweeping the front step, and I caught myself whistling some half-remembered song, and across the street, a woman in a yellow dress stopped walking and turned her whole body toward me with an expression I have never been able to forget. It was not anger. It was no surprise. It was a kind of patient horror, the way you might look at a child who has just stepped onto thin ice without knowing what ice is. I stopped whistling. She kept walking. I did not whistle in Brennock again. I did not whistle anywhere again. Even now, 4 years later, I do not whistle. I will explain why in time. No one in Brennock named their children after the living. I learned this from a customer, a heavy woman in a sun hat, who was telling Idabel about her daughter's pregnancy. We were going to call him after my father, she said, but of course we can't. Not while Dad's still here. Idabel nodded as if this were the most ordinary statement in the world, as if everyone everywhere knew that you did not name a child for someone who was still drawing breath. And the parking. Always the north side of the street after dark. I checked on the 4th night. I walked the whole length of Main Street, from the bakery to the empty lot at the far end in the blue hour after sunset. Every car was on the north side. Every single one. The south side of the street was a long, unbroken stretch of empty curb 200 yards long, like a held breath. When I asked Marin if she had noticed any of this, she said yes, but the way you say yes when you don't want to talk about something. Marin was happy in Brennock in a way she had not been happy in a very long time. The bakery work suited her. Idabel was teaching her things, about sourdough cultures, about milling, about an oven so old it had a name carved into its iron door, a name in a language neither of us recognized. And at night Marin came upstairs flour-dusted and tired in the good way, the way our mother used to look after a long day in the garden. I didn't want to be the one who took it from her, so I kept the list. And I kept watching. The first thing that actually frightened me happened on a Sunday 10 days in. On Sundays, the bakery closed at noon. After we cleaned up, Marin wanted to walk to a pond she had heard about from a customer. A small kettle pond on a dirt road that branched off the main road north of town. We packed sandwiches and wax paper. The afternoon was bright and humid, full of the white sky you get in Vermont in July. The kind of sky that has no depth to it, like a sheet hung in front of the sun. We had walked perhaps a mile when we came around a bend and saw him. He was standing in the middle of the dirt road. A man of about 50, in a green work shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbows, holding a wooden walking stick in his right hand. He was facing the way we had come. He was looking past us at nothing, at something just over our shoulders that did not exist. He was not moving. "Hi," Marin said when we got close. He didn't move. "Sir?" I said. He didn't move. We stopped about 10 feet from him. His chest rose and fell, slowly, regularly. His eyes were open. A fly landed on his cheek and walked across the bridge of his nose, and he did not so much as blink. His face had no expression on it. Not blank, not absent, not asleep. Paused. The way a video looks when the player has stopped on a single frame, and you can see all the small involuntary muscles of the face, but none of the voluntary ones. None of the muscles that make a face. "Boy, sir," I said again, quieter. Marin's hand closed on my arm. Hard. "Let's just go around him," she whispered. We went around him. We gave him a wide berth, wider than the road technically allowed, and we walked another 30 feet before either of us looked back. He had not turned. He was still facing the way we had come, still doing nothing, still standing in the exact center of the dirt road as if someone had set him down there and forgotten him. "What was that?" I said when we were out of earshot. "I don't know. Should we tell someone when we get back?" "Tell who?" I did not have an answer. Brennick did not have a police station that I had noticed. There was a town clerk's office, a post office, a small grocery, the bakery, a hardware store, a feed store, a diner that was only open for breakfast, 2 churches, and a building I thought was a doctor's office but had no sign on its door. The idea of calling 911 from a town we had been in for 10 days, about a man who was standing still in a road, did not feel like the correct course of action. It felt, in fact, like the wrong course of action in a way I could not articulate. We went to the pond. We ate our sandwiches. Marin swam, and I sat on a rock and watched her swim, and I tried to put the man out of my head. On the way back, an hour and a half later, the road was empty. There was no sign that anyone had ever been there. No footprints in the dust. No mark from the walking stick. The road looked as if it had not been walked on all day. That night, in our kitchen with the radio playing something for solo cello very softly, Marin spoke without looking up from the cup she was washing. "You shouldn't have said anything to him." I looked up. "What, when we walked past?" "You shouldn't have said, sir. You shouldn't have tried to talk to him." "Why not?" She turned the cup under the water for a long time. The water was hot. Steam rose around her hands. "I don't know," she said finally. I felt it. When you said it. Like we'd done something we weren't supposed to. Didn't you feel that?" I had felt it. That was the thing that frightened me most, sitting in that kitchen with the cello on the radio and my sister's back to me. I had felt it the moment I had opened my mouth. A small pressure behind my sternum, like a held breath that wasn't mine. A sense, and I am being precise, of an audience drawing in a quiet breath at the same moment I had drawn in mine. I had not been able to name it then. Naming it now made the kitchen feel too small. "Maybe," I said. We did not talk about it again. But that night I added a line to my list, in the small, careful handwriting I used when my hand was shaking. "If a person is standing still in a road, do not address them." I did not yet know whether that was a rule or a coincidence. I would find out. A week after the man on the road, I met Hollis. Hollis worked at the hardware store at the north end of Main Street. He was perhaps 30, with sandy hair he cut himself. You could tell by the slight unevenness around the ears, and a slow, considered way of speaking that I had begun to recognize as a Brennick trait. Everyone in Brennick left a half-beat of silence before they answered any question. A small space the size of a single drawn breath in which something was, I think now, being checked. A ledger, a wind. I don't know. He came into the bakery on Wednesday mornings to buy a half loaf of pumpernickel and a cup of coffee. And on the third Wednesday he was there. He asked me in that slow voice if I was the new help. Yeah, I said. I'm Ben. My sister Marin's the baker. Hollis. He had a good handshake. Dry, firm brief. How are you settling in? Fine. That half-beat. You'll let me know if you need anything. The store's just up the way. I almost let him leave. I do not know even now what made me say it. Maybe it was that he had asked the question as he meant it. Maybe it was that I had been carrying my notebook for 3 weeks by then, and the weight of it under my mattress was beginning to keep me awake at night. Hollis, I said. He turned at the door, the bell still ringing. Why does everyone park on the north side of the street at night? He looked at me for a long time. The bakery was not silent, the radio was playing, and a faucet was running in the back, and somewhere a fly was beating itself against a window. But it became, in the moment after I asked, attentive, as if a great many things had stopped what they were doing to listen. The man behind Hollis in line, an older gentleman in a green fishing hat, took one slow, careful step backward and pretended to examine a shelf of bread he had no intention of buying. That's not the kind of question we ask here, Hollis said. His voice was kind. That is what I remember most. His voice was kind and his eyes were not. You'll be all right if you don't ask it. He left. The man in the fishing hat ordered a scone. He did not make eye contact. When he handed me his money, his hand was shaking very slightly, and I understood, for the first time with a clarity that arrived like cold water down my back, that I had frightened him. Not by what I had asked, but by the simple fact that I had been the kind of person who would ask it. I stood at the counter for a long time after he was gone. Idabelle came out from the back, wiping her hands on her apron. She looked at me. She looked at the door. She looked at me again. You asked him something, she said. Yeah. What did you ask him? About the parking, she nodded slowly. She was not angry. She looked, I thought, tired deeply and structurally, the way a building is tired in its bones after 100 winters. Ben, she said, sit down a minute. I sat at one of the 2 small tables by the window. She sat across from me. The street outside was empty. The radio in the back was playing a piece I knew but could not name. I'm going to tell you the only thing anyone in Brennick will tell you, she said. And then I am going to ask you not to ask anyone else ever. Will you agree to that? Okay, there are things we do here. Some of them you've noticed already. Some of them you haven't yet. Nobody is going to explain why we do them. Not because we are keeping secrets from you. Because explaining is one of the things we don't do. Do you understand the difference? I think so. Watch copy, don't ask. If you do that, you will be fine. You will be more than fine. You will like it here. People do. And if I don't? She was quiet. Outside, a truck slowed at the corner and went on. You will figure out which rules matter, she said. Some don't, some do. The trouble is that you cannot tell from the outside which is which. So we keep all of them. It's easier that way. Idabelle, that's all I'm going to say. She stood. I like your sister. She is a good baker. I would like both of you to stay. She went back into the kitchen. I sat at the table for a long time watching the empty street, and I understood, without yet being able to articulate it, that I had just been given the only warning I was ever going to get. For 10 days, I tried very hard to be the kind of person who could simply watch and copy. I parked on the north side. I did not whistle. I used whichever door Idabelle told me to use. I learned by observation that when the church bell rang at 6 in the evening, a single soft, low note from a steeple somewhere I could never quite locate, every adult in sight of the bell briefly touched their left collarbone with 2 fingers. It was not a gesture of faith. It was smaller than that. The way you might brush a crumb from your shirt. The way you might check that a button was still there. I started doing it too. No one commented. No one acknowledged it. But on the second evening I did it, an old woman across the street nodded to me. Once, slightly without meeting my eyes, and went on her way, and I understood that I had passed some small examination I had not known I was sitting. I learned that on Thursdays, you do not sweep. Not your stoop. Not your floor. Not the dust off a windowsill. Idabelle kept a small chalkboard behind the counter that said, No sweeping today in her own square handwriting on Thursdays, and erased it on Fridays. I asked Maren once quietly if she knew why. She shrugged.
It's a Thursday thing, she said.
It's fine. I learned that the diner served exactly 9 kinds of pie, and that you ordered by pointing at the case, never by name. I learned that mail was delivered twice a day at 10 and at 4, and that you carried your outgoing mail down to the post office yourself, rather than leaving it in your box, because leaving it in the box was somehow, though to whom or what was never clear. I learned that on the first Friday of every month, the streetlights along Main Street were off all night, and no one walked outside, and the next morning, no one mentioned it. These were the easy ones. These were what I came to think of as the grammar of Brennick. The small, repeated, inflexible structures that held the day together. Once I had absorbed enough of the grammar, I could move through a day without producing a single ripple, which was, I came slowly to understand, the goal, to not be noticed, not to be a stone thrown into still water. The trouble was the harder rules. The ones nobody had told me about. The ones I was apparently supposed to find by feel, like a man crossing a frozen pond who has not been told where the soft ice is. The first hard rule I almost broke was about the back door of the bakery. There was a back door off the kitchen. It opened onto a small yard with a stack of firewood, a clothesline, and a patch of grass that went brown by mid-July. I had used that door a dozen times in my first week, mostly to take out the trash. No one had said anything. Then one morning in late July, I went to take out the trash, and Idabel said, without turning from her work, "Front door today, Ben." "It's full," I said. The bin was heavy. Front door. I went out the front, around the side of the building, through a narrow alley between the bakery and the hardware store, and dumped the trash in the bin behind the building. When I came back inside, Idabel was watching me. She had not gone back to her dough. "Front door for the next 6 days," she said. "Why?" The temperature of the kitchen changed. It was a small change, smaller than the gap between a body in a room and the same room empty, but I felt it the way you feel someone you didn't know was there clear their throat behind you. "Front door, Idabel," I said. "Got it." She went back to her dough. For 6 days I used the front door. I carried trash down the alley in the heat. I came in groceries the long way around. On the 7th day, she said, again without looking up, "Back door's fine again." And that was the end of it. I never figured out what had happened during those 6 days. But on the 3rd night of the 6, around 2 in the morning, I could not sleep. And I went to the upstairs window that looked out over the backyard. And I lifted the curtain. The yard looked the way it always looked. Firewood, clothesline, the brown patch of grass. The moon was 3/4 full, and the yard was lit in that flat blue light that takes the color out of everything. But I knew, with a certainty that arrived without thought, the way you know there is someone in the room when you wake up at night, that something was standing very still next to the woodpile. I could not see it. The woodpile was where the woodpile had always been. Nothing moved. There was no shape, no silhouette, no pair of eyes in the dark. But it was there. I lowered the curtain. I went back to bed. I did not look out that window again until Idabel told me the back door was fine. When I checked on the 7th morning, the yard was empty in a way that it had not been empty in 6 days. The grass was still brown. The firewood was still firewood. But something that had been there was gone, and the yard knew it. And so did I. It was August when I started noticing the children. There were perhaps 24 children in Brennick between the ages of about 4 and 12. I would see them in small groups in the afternoons, walking from the school at the end of the road toward their homes. They were quiet in the way Brennick children were naturally quiet, but they were not unfriendly. They waved at me sometimes. One little girl, perhaps 7, with red hair so bright it looked dyed, started saying "Hi, Ben" to me when she walked past the bakery. And I said hi back, and that became our routine. What I noticed, slowly, over the first 2 weeks of August, was that on certain days, not all days, but some, the children walked in pairs. And every pair held hands, and the older child was always on the left, always. I watched for 2 weeks. There was never an exception, not once. On the days the children walked in pairs, every single pair was older on the left. And on the days they walked alone or in groups of 3 or 4 or 5, the rule did not seem to apply. I asked Myron what she thought it meant. She looked at me for a long moment, and then she set down the cup of tea she was holding, and she said in a voice I had never heard her use before, "Ben, I am asking you not to keep doing this." Doing what? Watching. She was sitting on the small couch in our apartment. She had flour in her hair and the part of it. She looked, I thought, with a small private shock, older than she had been in June. A year older, maybe 2. Watching everything. Cataloging everything. I see you doing it. Ida Bell sees you doing it. Hollis came in yesterday and asked me if you were okay. I'm fine. You are not fine. You are doing what she told us not to do. You are trying to figure it out. I'm not asking anyone. I'm just looking. That is the same thing here. Marin rubbed her face with both hands. When she lowered them, her eyes were wet. Ben, please, we have a place to live. We have jobs. Ida Bell pays us in cash and she lets us eat for free and we can save up. And we can leave in a year with money and... I like it here, Ben. I am happy in a way I have not been happy since before Mom got sick. And you are going to ruin it. I'm not going to ruin it. You will. You will keep watching. And someone will see you watching. And they will... She stopped. They will what? She would not say. She got up, went to her bedroom, shut the door, and I sat on the couch in the dark for a long time. The radio was playing a string quartet I did not recognize. Through the open window, the church bell rang 6. And I heard, very clearly, very softly, because I had been listening for it without knowing, the sound of 24 people on the street touching their left collarbones at the same moment, all together like a single soft breath drawn and released. I touched my own, and I noticed, sitting there in the dark, that Marin, through the wall, in her room that had touched hers too. She had not been outside. She had not been able to see the bell. She had simply known. That was the night I understood that I was losing her. He came back into the bakery the second week of August, a Wednesday. He bought his pumpernickel and his coffee, and he did not look at me while he paid, and he turned to leave, and then, at the door, with the bell still ringing, he turned back. "Ben," he said, "walk with me a minute." I looked at Ida Bell. She was kneading. She did not look up. "Go," she said. We walked north out of town, past the post office, past the feed store, past the last building on the main street, and onto the dirt road that ran out into the farmland north of Brennock. There were cows in the distance. The smell of cut hay was so strong it made my eyes water. We walked in silence for perhaps a quarter mile before he spoke. "I am going to break a rule for you," he said. "Okay. I am breaking it because you are about to break a bigger one if I don't, and because I do not want to lose your sister. She has been good for Ida Bell. Ida Bell has not had help she liked in 15 years. I did not say anything. There are 3 kinds of rules in Brennock, he said. I am only going to tell you about them in general terms. I am not going to give you specifics. The specifics are what get people in trouble. Do you understand? Yes. The first kind is the rules everyone knows and everyone follows: parking, the bell. The Thursdays. You have figured out most of those. They are like the rules of the road. If everyone follows them, nothing happens. If you don't, you might be hurt, but mostly people just stop doing business with you. Those rules are easy. Those rules are fine. He stopped walking. He looked out across the field. The second kind are rules that are specific to certain people, certain houses. The front door, the back door, that's Ida Bell's. Each household has its own version. They are not dangerous. They are like dietary restrictions, things this house does not do. You follow them because you live there. And the third kind. He did not answer for a long time. A tractor moved across a far field, soundless with distance. The third kind, he said, are the rules nobody will ever tell you. Not me, not Ida Bell, not anyone. Those rules exist because the things they protect us from are not noticeable when you ask. Asking is a kind of waving. It tells the thing you are asking about that you are here, that you have seen something, that you are a candidate. A candidate for what? Don't, he turned to me. His face was very tired. The town has worked out over a very long time what you can and cannot do without waving. Most of us never even consciously know what those rules are. We just don't do certain things, the way you don't put your hand on a hot stove. You don't think about it. You just don't. Hollis, the reason I'm telling you this, he said, is because you are about to start asking the third kind. I can see it in your face. I saw it last month when you asked me about the parking. You felt the answer when I didn't give it to you. You felt the shape of the thing not being said. And now you are trying to find that shape on your own, aren't you? I did not answer. He nodded as if I had. Stop, he said. Please, for your sister. I am not asking you for you. I am asking you because Idabel asked me to. Because Marin is the first person Idabel has trusted in 15 years. And if you keep doing what you are doing, the town will solve it. And the way the town solves things is not something you want to see. What does that mean? It means stop. He turned around and walked back toward his store. The cut hay smell was so strong by then that the whole field seemed to be exhaling. I stood on the road for a long time watching him go. He did not look back. I tried. For 10 days I was very good. I parked. I did not whistle. I touched my collarbone at 6. I used whichever door Idabel pointed to. I waved at the red-haired girl. I went to bed at 9 and got up at 6. I did not write anything down. I did not look out the back window at night. I stopped keeping the list. I burned the notebook in the small wood stove in the apartment, page by page, and watched the pages curl and blacken and rise as ash. For 10 days, I almost believed I could do this. On the 9th night, I had a dream. In the dream, I was standing in our apartment in the dark, in front of the window that faced north, the one that looked out over the field of unmown grass that sloped down toward the trees. The window was open. The curtain was pulled back. And I was standing very still the way the man on the road had been standing still. And I was facing south, looking back into our own apartment, looking at a bed in which I could see myself sleeping. I woke up. The window was open. The curtain was pulled back. I had not opened either of them. I knew this with the certainty you have only of things you have not done. I closed the window. I closed the curtain. I went back to bed. I did not sleep again that night. In the morning, Marin did not come upstairs after work. This was not strange in itself. Sometimes she stayed late with Idabel. Sometimes they had tea in the kitchen and talked. I made dinner for myself, and ate it and washed up and read for an hour. And then, when the church bell rang 9 and there were no footsteps on the stairs, I went down the inside staircase to the bakery to see if she wanted anything. The kitchen was empty. The ovens were off. The lights were off. Idabel's apron was on its hook, neatly folded over the bar. The back door was open about 3 inches, which on a Wednesday in August did not violate any rule I knew about. Marin? No answer. The radio in the kitchen was playing very softly, even though no one had turned it on. I went out the back door. The yard was empty. The clothesline was empty. The woodpile was a woodpile. The patch of brown grass was a patch of brown grass. But there was a path. There had always been a path, I realized, standing in the backyard in the blue evening light. There had been a path the whole time. Through a gap in the hedge, down a slope, into a stand of pines that I had seen from the upstairs window every morning for 2 months without seeing. The path was worn. It had been worn for 100 years. People had been walking down it in single file in the same place. For 100 years, I stood at the top of the path I knew, with the same wordless certainty I had had about the woodpile that night through the window. That going down it was the kind of thing Hollis had been talking about. The third kind, I went anyway. She was my sister. The path went farther than it looked. A quarter mile, maybe more. The pines thickened and then thinned, and the air grew colder by several degrees in a way that had nothing to do with shade. And then I came out at the edge of a clearing. In the clearing, there was a building. It was a small church. White clapboard, a steeple with no bell in it. Just an empty wooden frame where a bell should have been. 3 steps up to a single front door. The paint on the building was old but cared for. There was no sign. There was no parking lot. There was no path leading away from it on the other side. The clearing simply held the building in its center, the way a hand holds a small stone. And beyond the clearing, the trees closed in again. The front door was open. A warm yellow light came from inside. The kind of light an oil lamp makes is soft and unsteady. I could hear voices, not many, maybe a dozen. They were not singing. They were speaking in unison, very quietly, the way you say grace at a long table. I could not make out the words. The cadence was wrong for English, but it might have been English. It might have been a language I knew, slowed down and emptied out until it was no longer any language at all. I stood at the edge of the trees. I do not know for how long. Probably 30 seconds. It felt like much longer, and in those 30 seconds, I understood several things at once. I understood that Maren was inside. I understood that everyone I had seen in Brennock, Idabel, Hollis, the man in the fishing hat, the woman who had nodded at me when I had touched my collarbone for the first time, the red-haired girl, would be inside on a different night. On a rotation I would never be told and would never be invited to join. I understood that this was not a thing I had been meant to see. And I understood, and this was the worst of the understandings, the one that arrived in my chest like a cold hand, that the rules I had been trying to decode for 2 months were not rules for the people of Brennock. They were rules around something, a shape, a presence, a thing that lived in the town the way a tenant lives in a house and that the town had built its whole life around not waking up. The parking, the whistling, the doors, the bell, the names, the Thursdays, all of it was a long, patient, multi-generational choreography of not disturbing it. And the little church in the clearing was not a place of worship. It was a place of appeasement. And I had walked up to it in my work boots, breathing audibly, having forgotten to touch my collarbone at 6 o'clock that evening because I had been distracted looking for my sister. The voices stopped, just stopped, not finished. Not faded, stopped the way a record stops when someone lifts the needle. I did not move. I do not believe I breathed. Somebody inside the church began to walk toward the door. I could hear the floorboards, 1 step, 2 steps, 3. The light inside the church changed. It dimmed, the way a flame dims when a window is open somewhere far away. And then I heard very clearly somebody inside the church say my name. Don't call it. Don't shout it. Say it. The way you say the name of something you have just identified. Ben. I turned around, and I went back up the path. I did not run. I walked very quickly, with the absolute conviction that running would be a wave so large that the entire town would feel it before I reached the hedge. I walked back through the pines, through the gap in the hedge, across the yard, in through the back door of the bakery, the back door, on a Wednesday which was somehow miraculously allowed, and up the stairs to our apartment. I closed our door. I sat on our couch in the dark. I waited. Maren came home an hour later. She did not turn on the lights. She walked past me to her bedroom. At the door she paused. You went down the path, she said. She was not asking, yes, how far? To the edge of the clearing. I didn't go in. She was quiet for a long time. They heard you, she said. I know. They said your name. I know. She came into the living room and sat down across from me. The street light through the window cut a narrow line of yellow across her face. She did not look like a woman who had come from a service. She did not look like she had been crying. She looked the way she had looked every night of the last 2 months, tired, content, home. And that was the thing that broke me. Ben, she said. Her voice was very calm. I had never heard her voice that calm. You are going to do exactly what I tell you for the next 2 days, and you are not going to ask any questions. Do you understand? Yes. Tomorrow you will go to work as if nothing happened. You will use the front door for everything, both directions all day. You will not speak to any customer first. If they speak to you, you will answer in as few words as possible. You will touch your collarbone at 6. You will come upstairs at the end of the day and you will stay upstairs. You will not look out the back window. You will keep the curtains shut. Do you understand? Yes. On Friday night you are going to leave. Maren, you are going to take the car. You are going to drive south. You are not going to stop in Brennock for anything. You are not going to say goodbye to anyone. You are going to go, and what about you? The pause this time was the longest of my life. In it I heard the radio in the kitchen, an old recording of something solo and stringed. Very faint, almost not there. I'm staying, she said. No. Ben. No. Maren. No. You don't get to. I am staying, Ben. Her voice is still calm, still warm. Still my sister's exactly, except for the calmness, except for the part of her voice that no longer belonged to me. I made this choice before tonight. I made it weeks ago. Idabel told me what staying meant, and I said yes, and I'm not going to explain it to you because explaining is one of the things we don't do. You came here for me. I am asking you to leave for me. That is the trade. I sat in the dark and I cried quietly the way you cry when you are trying very hard not to be a wave. She came over and sat next to me and put her hand on my back, and we did not say anything else for a long time. The last thing she said before she went to her room was this: Ben, when you leave, do not look at the bakery window. Do not look at me. Do not look at Idabel. Do not look back. Why? She almost smiled. The almost smile was the worst part. Because if you look back, she said, they'll know you didn't really go. Thursday, I went to work. I did not sweep. I used the front door. I sold bread to people who did not look at me. The man in the fishing hat came in at 11, and he paid me with a $5 bill that had a small ink mark on the corner, and as he handed it to me, he held my eyes for the first time since the day I had asked Hollis about the parking. He gave me, very slightly, a nod. It was not approval. It was asterisk acknowledgement. Asterisk. I did not know what of the church bell rang at 6, and I touched my collarbone. And across the bakery, Idabel touched hers, and I felt for the first time clearly the thing I had been doing all summer. I felt the small invisible thread that ran from my hand through the air through every other hand in town. All of us together, all of us at once. And I felt the thing on the other end of the thread. I felt it consider us, the way a sleeper considers a sound in another room before deciding it was nothing, before turning over, before sleeping again. It was so much larger than I had thought. At closing, Idabel came out to the front of the bakery and stood for a long time without speaking. Moran told me, she said finally. Yes. You have been good today. I am trying. Do tomorrow the way you did today, and then leave. I will. She put her hand on my shoulder. Her hand was warm and flowery and very heavy. She held it there longer than I expected. We don't choose this, Ben, she said. You should know that. None of us chose it, we were born into it, mostly. The ones who came in as you and your sister came in because they needed to, and they stayed because it stays with you. Once you know, once you have stood at the edge of a clearing, once you have heard your name said in a room you were not in. I could not speak. Your sister will be all right, she said. Better than all right. She will have a life here. A real one. She will have a child. She will have people who watch out for her in ways you would not understand if I had a year to explain. Then explain. She smiled. Just a little, sad. We don't explain. She went back into the kitchen. I never saw her again. Friday morning, the red-haired girl waved at me from across the street. I waved back. She stopped. She pointed at her own collarbone. She tapped it twice, very deliberately, with 2 small fingers. It was 9 in the morning. The bell would not ring for 9 more hours. But I touched my collarbone anyway, and she nodded, satisfied. And I saw for 1/2 second the same expression on her 7-year-old face that I had seen on Hollis's face in the field of cut hay. The asterisk kindness asterisk of it. The asterisk tiredness asterisk of it. And I understood that whatever lived in Brennick had been living in her too, since the day she was born, and that she had been trying, in her small careful way, to keep me alive. She walked on. That was the last face I saw clearly in Brennick. At 7:30, with 2 hours of summer light still in the sky, I put my bag in the Corolla, which was parked, as it had been every night for 2 months. On the north side of the street, I got in. I started it. I pulled out slowly, no faster than any other car on that road had ever moved. I did not look at the bakery window. I did not look back. I drove south on the road we had come in on. I passed the field where Hollis had walked with me. I passed the last farmhouse. I passed a sign that said Brennick Town Line, which I had never seen before, because there had been no sign on the way in, and I will never know whether there had been a sign on the way in, and I had simply not been ready to see it, or whether the sign appeared only for people leaving. About a mile past the town line, the engine coughed. Not stalled, not stuttered. Asterisk coughed. Asterisk once, a small wet sound, like someone clearing their throat from another room. The dashboard lit up. There were warning symbols on it I had never seen before. Symbols I do not believe were in any owner's manual ever printed by Toyota. Lights in the wrong colors. shapes that almost meant something and did not. The car slowed. I did not slow it. My foot was still on the accelerator, and rolled, gently, onto the shoulder, and the engine died. And I sat in the driver's seat with my hands on the wheel, and I understood that the town was not done with me yet. I tried the ignition. Nothing. I waited 2 minutes. Nothing. I waited 2 more. Around me, the dusk was deepening. The sky was that particular pale orange Vermont gets in summer, like the inside of a lampshade. Across the road, a field of corn moved in a wind I could not feel through the closed windows of the car. On the 11th try, the engine turned over as if nothing had been wrong. The dashboard warnings were gone. The fuel gauge was where it had been. The car was fine asterisk. I drove another mile. Cough. I pulled over. I waited. After several minutes, the engine started. Another mile. Cough. I did this 6 times. By the 4th time, I had stopped pretending I did not understand what was happening. The car was being allowed to leave, but slowly. It was being metered. Something was watching me go, and it was not letting me go faster than it wanted me to go. On the 5th stop, in full dark on a stretch of road with no houses in either direction, I sat in the car with the engine off, and I looked out the passenger window into a stand of birches at the edge of the road. There was nothing in the birches. There was nothing in them in the specific full way that the woodpile had been Nothing on those 6 nights in late July. The birches were holding nothing the way a hand holds a small stone. And I sat in the car. And I did not look directly at them. And after several minutes, as the engine turned over of its own accord, I drove on. I thought that night about turning around. I thought about it for a long time, on the shoulder of a Vermont state road, with the engine ticking as it cooled. I thought about driving back, about telling Marin I had changed my mind, that I would stay, that I would learn the 3rd kind of rule by feel, the way the rest of them had, that I would be there when her child was born, that I would be the uncle who taught a small girl to touch her collarbone at 6. What stopped me was that I knew, in a way I could not have explained to anyone who had not stood at the edge of that clearing, that the offer to come back had a shape too, that it would also be a wave, that the town was not asking me to come back. The town was letting me go on its own schedule, and any deviation forward or backward would be the wrong kind of motion. Stop, wait, drive, cough. Stop, wait. By midnight, I had made it 40 miles. By 2 in the morning, I was at a truck stop near the New York border, and the car started normally, and it has started normally ever since. That was 4 years ago. I live in Pennsylvania now. I work at a printing company. I have an apartment with thin walls and a girlfriend who is patient with me in ways I do not deserve. And a cat who sleeps on my chest at night. I have not been back to Vermont. I have not tried to call the bakery because the bakery does not have a phone number listed anywhere on the internet. And because I know that if I drove back to Brenuck, I would either find that the town had no record of me, or that it had a great deal of record of me. And I do not know which would be worse. Marin writes to me. Not often, twice a year. The letters come from a P.O. box in a town in New Hampshire that I have looked up on a map, which I know exists, but that I do not believe she has ever physically visited. Her letters are short. She says she is well. She says Idabel is well. She says the bakery is busy. In the 2nd year, she said she had met a man kind. She said, *quiet in the right way*, and that they were thinking about a child. In the 3rd year, she said the child had been born. A girl. They had named her after Idabel's mother, who had been dead for 40 years. Because of course we couldn't name her after anyone living. I sat at my kitchen table and I read that line 3 times before I folded the letter and put it away in the drawer where I keep the others. The letters never have a return address other than the P.O. box. They never invite me to visit. They never ask me to write back. I have tried twice. Both times, the letters came back stamped no such addressee, even though I had copied the box number exactly off the envelope she had sent me. In the most recent letter, the one that came last spring, Marin wrote something I have been turning over in my head for 2 months. She wrote, *Ben, I want you to know that you did the right thing by leaving. I want you to know that I love you. I want you to know that the town has been kind to me. I want you to know one more thing, and I am only telling you because I do not think it can reach you where you are. And I want you to be careful about it anyway. You learned more rules than most outsiders ever do. You learned them faster than anyone Idable can remember. The town noticed. It still notices. Asterisk do not whistle. Ben, I know it has been 4 years. Do not whistle, ever. Do not stand still in any road for any reason. And if you find yourself touching your collarbone at 6 o'clock in the evening, do not stop yourself. Just let yourself do it, because the doing of it is what keeps you on this side of the line. Asterisk I love you. Asterisk M asterisk. I have not whistled in 4 years. Not once. I catch myself sometimes, in the shower, on the bus, walking to the corner store, about to, and I stop. My girlfriend has noticed, she asked me once, gently, why I never whistle. I told her I had never picked it up as a kid. She let it go. She lets a great many things go. It is one of the things I love about her. And one of the things that frightens me when I think about it too long. I do not stand still in the road. If I have to cross a street, I cross it. If a car is coming, I wait on the sidewalk, never in the lane. I have a small private terror of intersections, of any place where stopping is possible, of any moment in which I might forget myself for too long, and at 6 o'clock in the evening no matter where I am. At work, on the bus, in the grocery store in the back row of a movie theater. At dinner with my girlfriend's parents, I touch my left collarbone with 2 fingers. I do it casually. I do it as if I am adjusting a collar or scratching an itch. Nobody has ever asked me about it. I do not know what I am keeping at bay by doing it. I do not know whether the thing I am keeping at bay is in Brennock, or whether it followed me out slowly, on the same metered schedule that let my car go. I do not know whether my doing it is what keeps it slow, or whether my doing it is the thing that lets it know exactly where I am. I want to tell you that I have moved on. I want to tell you that whatever Brennock was, it was confined to Brennock, and that it does not reach me here. I cannot tell you that. About a month ago, on a Tuesday evening, I was walking home from the bus stop. My block in Pennsylvania is unremarkable. A strip of row houses, a corner store with a faded awning, a stop sign at the end of the street that everyone politely ignores. A man was standing in the middle of the sidewalk about half a block ahead of me. He was not moving. He was facing the way I had come. He was wearing a green work shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbows. He was holding a wooden walking stick. His face had no expression on it. Not blank. Not absent. Asterisk paused. Asterisk. I crossed to the other side of the street. I did not speak to him. I did not look at him directly as I passed. When I reached the corner, I looked back. He was gone. The sidewalk was empty in the specific full way the woodpile had been empty, the way the birches had been empty. The kind of emptiness that is not the absence of something but the asterisk attendance asterisk of it. It was 5:58. At 6 o'clock, on the corner of my own block, in a city 8 hours from Vermont. A city I had chosen specifically asterisk. Because asterisk it was 8 hours from Vermont. I touched my left collarbone with 2 fingers, and I felt, very faintly, somebody else do the same thing at the same moment. Very far away. I felt my sister. I felt Hollis, and the man in the fishing hat, and the red-haired girl, and a child whose name I do not know, who is being raised on rules that will keep her. And the town, and the thing in the town in the careful balance it has held for longer than any of us have been alive. I felt the thread. And I understood that Maureen had been wrong about one thing in her letter. She had thought the town still asterisk noticed asterisk me. She had not realized, or she had, and had not wanted to write it, that the noticing went both ways. That the rules I had learned were not just protections. They were a tether. They were how the town held on to its own. And I was, whether I had wanted to be or not, one of its own now. I went upstairs. I made dinner. My girlfriend came home. She kissed me on the cheek. She put her bag down. She poured herself a glass of water. And she stood at the kitchen window for a moment, looking out at the street, and then, without thinking about it, without noticing she was doing it, the way you do not notice your own breath. She lifted 2 fingers to her left collarbone, and touched it very lightly. It was 6:01. She had never done that before. I did not ask her about it. I did not say anything, because asking would be a wave, and because I have learned, finally, What Idabel meant when she said that explaining is one of the things we don't do. I sleep with the curtain closed on the window that faces north. I do not whistle. At 6 o'clock I touch my collarbone, and I feel the others, faint and patient, and a long way away, doing the same. And I know, the way you know the shape of your own hand in the dark, that there is a rule I have not yet learned, that there is something I am still doing wrong, or not doing, or about to do. The owner is waiting to see which, and now sometimes when she is washing a cup at the sink, my girlfriend leaves a half-beat of silence before she answers any question. I have stopped trying to figure out what it is. I think that finally, it is the rule.